本来是打算去美国读博士的，然后当时也是2020年拿到了 offer， 但最后就是因为特朗普的 PP1043号总统令，然后没办法了，就是现在在国内就业了。
Why are the visas of Chinese students rejected even after they get offers?
If Chinese students want to come here and study Shakespeare and the Federalist Papers, that's what they need to learn from America. They don't need to learn quantum computing and artificial intelligence from America.
How has China become a cultural symbol of evil in the American imagination? With all the clues, we piece together an explanation.
Had published findings that China's spy services had a wealth of opportunities.
It's very rare.
In Western news and popular culture, the narrative has become China in all aspects is bad.
Do you think China is a threat to the US?
We interviewed veteran media professionals who have covered China for decades, met with social influencers, and talked with students.
其实这是一个很美国化的表态。
Do you think Chinese students are spies? And do you think denying visas to these students will prevent espionage?
Through these interactions, we try and understand how the idea of the China threat manifested in the cultural sphere. On the last day of her time in office as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet issued a 46-page report on Xinjiang. Following the release, stories that China may have committed serious human rights violations hit the headlines.
报告是虚假信息的大杂烩，再次证明人权高专办已经沦为美西方整治广大发展中国家的打手和帮凶。
For many, it is just one of the attempts by the US to minimize China's rise and manufacture consent among the public for future aggressions against China.
They try to use the UN as additional leverage to move their geopolitical objectives forward. In the case of Xinjiang, again, the US was encouraging separatism, violent separatism. And then when the Chinese government attempted to react to this, to solve this problem, they began fabricating claims of genocide.
Now, on the ground in Xinjiang.
Encircling Taiwan.
We've lived through China's military...
The United States is the conductor of the orchestra, and one day he brings in the Uyghurs, the next day he brings in Taiwan.
But the trope of China as a looming threat to the US has long become the primary driver of coverage on China. It is inherent in how the Western media operates.
When I was ambassador, and I would discuss this with the journalists. And they say, well, our problem is if we write a favorable story about China, it gets put on page 26 of the newspaper, or it's not covered at all. But if I talk about Chinese dissidents or Chinese human rights abuses, then I get front page coverage.
The man yelled, police.
So here is a free press, which by applying market forces is giving a completely distorted view of the other country.
They've attempted to steal our research.
The equivalent of CIA and the Chinese system.
Investigate human rights crimes around the world, including China.
The mainstream media echoes the priority of the United States, that the media has gone into full anti-China mode. That's the order from the United States.
I think they lack an independent mind in this regard. They just want to report on this kind of negative news and attract readers. They are sending the wrong signal, sending the wrong information to US public, and they should be blamed for polluting the environment for US-China relations.
Changes happen very quickly in China, and so I believe that no single story, no single media organization can capture the complexities of China, because I believe that the China story is a mosaic.
In Beijing, we find Jerry Gray, who has lived in the country for 18 years and even cycled across it.
I think we're in Gansu now. We're on the borderland between Hunan and Hubei in a few minutes.
But like many YouTubers in China, sharing his independent and personal experience of China has made him into a CPC shill.
And you have been arguing China is not a threat, and you have posted a lot of things like that on social media. But Americans would argue you are paid by the CPC.
I wish. Yeah.
Are you paid by?
I'm not paid by the CPC, no. I'm not paid by anyone for most of my things. I occasionally write an article that gets published and I get a fee for that. I'm not paid by anybody to say the things that I say. People telling me that things were different to my reality, and that's how it developed. I didn't set out to be political. I happen to be quite inquisitive, and when someone tells me something is true, I'll go off to find out whether or not it is true. Sometimes it is true, sometimes it isn't. But when it relates to China, it's almost 100% untrue, almost. People often ask me if I support China's Communist Party. The Communist Party of China. Do I support it? And the answer to that is yes, I do. Did I always support it? No. I support it because I've seen the results. I support it because I know what happens. When I first came to China, there were problems, there were difficulties, there was corruption, and there was wastage, and there was inefficiencies. There's still some inefficiencies in China, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. But on every measurable metric that you can think of, health, education, crime, wealth, economy, inflation, every measurable metric that is possible for anybody to think of that is a positive measurement of lifestyle, China is improving in every respect.
Well, in a famous fable by Aesop, the dog that was swimming a scorpion across a raging river was surprised when the scorpion bit it and began its death, and looked round and asked the scorpion, "Why did you do that?" And the scorpion shrugged and said, "Because I'm a scorpion. The empire behaves in the way that it does because it is the empire. That's what they do."
The perpetual myth of the China threat has even subjected a group of young Chinese students to an unwarranted fate.
这是当时拿到的拒签的单子。
对，这个是当时面签完给的一个就是行政审核的单子，然后这个是最后被拒签的一个结果，在系统上显示的。
Pan Yin is one of thousands students who have been admitted to American universities but denied visas by the U.S. government since the U.S. Presidential Proclamation 1043 took effect in May 2020. Presidential Proclamation 1043 claims to prohibit students who graduated from universities supporting China's military civil fusion strategy from obtaining certain U.S. visas. The students find the reasoning ridiculous.
其实我的本科是一个双学位，它是管理学和工学的一起。就是我其实还准备了很多的解释，说明我的就是所学到的东西其实并不是敏感的专业。
Students from 7 Chinese universities have been particularly affected by the executive order. The 7 sons of national defense are being played as pawns to be sacrificed in a geopolitical chess game. Even though Liu Zheng was not from one of the universities, his request for a visa was still denied.
国防棋子它可能包含了北航、北理，然后北邮不在棋子名单里面，但是也是受打击的一个重点学校，还有就是哈工大哈工程，还有南理工这样的一个7个学校吧。名单其实最开始是 ASPI， 就是澳洲的一个智库提供的一个名单，它可能是我们会在美国境内进行一些 spy 就是间谍活动，但实际上根本就没有证据，受害者有罪论。我本科是做物联网工程的，我如何去用一个安卓一个终端去控制一下我家里面的电器，这是一个非常实用的，也是非常民用的一个东西。但即使这样，我们还是被拒了，我就感觉也挺委屈的。为什么别人都行，为什么我们就不行？
but I spent the last 13 years teaching at Harvard University as a professor. I had lots of Chinese students. But we have to keep our people meeting with each other, learning from each other, studying with each other. Here at Tsinghua.
At World Peace Forum in July, we posed the question to the U.S. ambassador to China.
Speaking for students, so every year around 3,000 to 5,000 Chinese students are denied visas under the proclamation 10043. So, and it's about 1/5 of all the students who major in STEM and want to study in the U.S. You have taught so many students, so I wonder, do you think Chinese students are spies? And do you think denying visas to these students will prevent espionage? How will the China-U.S. relations be improved if the U.S. sees China as a threat? Thank you.
As I said at the beginning of my remarks, Chinese students are welcome in the United States. I know that. I say that sincerely, personally, based on my experience teaching Chinese students. We do have our law, and our law says if you lie on your visa application about your link professionally to an intelligence or military organization, you shall be turned down.
The students find the ambassador's response hypocritical.
其实这是一个很美国化的表态，就是他说的跟他做的，基本上是不一样的。可能在短期之内没办法去美国留学了。如果他不取消的话，可能后几代我们的校友可能就出现断层，就没办法再去美国留学了。包括10043的影响，其实它也不止在美国本土，因为一些和美国关系比较密切的，比如澳大利亚。还有甚至英国，它因为你的有过拒签经历的话，它同样会拒签你经历。
For the students, taking legal action has become the only way they may be treated fairly.
我们聘请了一个律师对美国拜登政府发起诉讼。
你们要准备起诉谁？
起诉人、被告人有很多，一个是拜登政府，然后还有布林肯，还有一个就是国防部长。
其实这个诉讼现在已经开始进行了，我觉得大家依然在推进这件事情，就是代表我们大家还是希望能给到大家一个公正、就合理的一个回复的。
A lawsuit was filed in June.
The awful thing is that not only the conflicts between two governments, but the resentment between the people is increasing. My idea to develop a negative cooperation just because a confrontation is inevitable. So we need management. You all know the boxing match. And in the boxing match, there's a lot of regulations. And do not use the elbow and cannot hit the back of the head. So these kind of rules and prevent killing each other. So, but then still they have the very crucial, brutal the beating against each other.
For the dozens of interviewees we talked with, the prospect of future bilateral relations remains gloomy.
What does the future look like?
My concern is that China-US relations will only get worse down the road. So we have to prepare for that.
It's impossible to change China according to Americans' will and plan. U.S. even cannot change Afghanistan according to their plan. They cannot change Cuba according to their will. They cannot change Korea. They cannot change. Most of the countries cannot be changed according to Americans' ideas. So how can they change China according to their ideas? So my understanding, Biden's policy is quite pragmatic. So he said, no, in the last several decades, and China never changed according to Americans' will. So his administration don't think it's possible. It will be bark at the wrong tree and to adopt that kind, if they adopt that kind of goal as their strategy.
And we have to be smart enough to figure out a way not just to debate, not just to send messages, not just to present the other side with lists and demands, but genuinely to explore, to listen, to engage, and to find ways to reconcile our competing interests, at least to prevent conflict and crisis.
I think that China's rise as a global power should not necessarily be viewed as a threat. There should be a way for global powers to coexist peacefully.
I think we need more exchanges, both at the government level and the society level.
The students' lawsuit is still pending. When misunderstandings between two peoples seemingly deepen, will it spill over into the economic arena where the countries share even closer ties?